let's dive right into this, shall we? Welcome to this explainer, where we're taking a deep, entirely objective sociological look at one of the absolute most intense sporting and cultural rivalries on the planet. I'm talking about the Glasgow Old Firm, but here's the twist. We actually aren't looking at it in Scotland. No, we're exploring how this incredibly fierce, deeply entrenched division between Celtic and Rangers somehow survives, adapts, and honestly, completely thrives over 3,000 miles away. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating sociological phenomenon known as the Diaspora Effect. So to really understand this effect, we first need to look at the contrast between these two completely different worlds. If you're a supporter living over in Glasgow, the Old Firm Rivalry, well, it's an omnipresent condition. It's this high-density tribal atmosphere. It's a reality you live every single day. On the subway, at the workplace, down at the local pub, it's literally the air you breathe. But what exactly happens when you transplant that reality all the way across the Atlantic? In these sprawling, multicultural urban landscapes like New York, Toronto, or Chicago, this rivalry takes a fascinating leap. It doesn't just survive the trip, it evolves into something entirely unique. You know, what's truly fascinating here is the language our sources use to describe the neighborhood bars hosting these transplanted fans. They call them sanctuaries of memory or architectural time capsules. These North American outposts, they aren't just your standard places with a TV screen to passively watch a football match, not at all. They are highly curated, intensely preserved spaces. They act as the primary infrastructure for transmitting a very specific cultural identity, one that's carefully protected by the massive distance of an ocean. Just imagine the sensory experience described here. They call it Sunday morning disorientation. Picture walking into an Old Firm bar in a city like New York on a Sunday morning, often at an absolutely ungodly hour, pint in hand, way before the sun is even fully up. It's an incredibly immersive experience. You step right off a quiet American street and bam, you are instantly hit with an environment specifically designed to replicate the conditions of home. You notice the specific scarves hanging up in the rafters, you hear the precise songs being belted out by vocal leaders, and you feel this palpable tension that matches exactly what you'd experience in a pub on Govan Road or London Road back in Glasgow. And that brings us to the critical sociological difference right at the heart of the diaspora effect. See, over in Glasgow, the rivalry is largely involuntary. Culturally speaking, you're just born into it. It's unavoidable. But in North America, the fandom is volitional. It actually requires active curation. The patrons sitting in these bars are expatriates fiercely holding on to a piece of home, sitting right alongside second and third generation fans. Because they are actively choosing to participate, the environment becomes much more self-conscious, deliberate, and honestly often way more fiercely protected than it might even be back home. So how exactly do these environments manage to bridge that massive transatlantic gap? Well, our source identifies three distinct mechanisms used to sustain the old world in the new. These are the transmission of ritual, acting as a curator of history, and providing an anchor of identity. Let's start with the transmission of ritual. This is really about passing down the syntax of the rivalry. Think about the crazy irony here for a second. You have young fans sitting in a Toronto or Chicago pub who have literally never set foot inside Celtic Park or Ibrox. Yet, entirely within those four walls, they are learning the incredibly subtle, completely unwritten rules of engagement. They aren't just memorizing the words to the songs, they're learning the specific when and how of matchday traditions that perfectly mirror the tension happening thousands of miles away. Which brings us right into the second mechanism, serving as a curator of history. In these bars, history is absolutely not some static textbook. It's a living argument. Collective memory is treated with this amazing forensic intensity. We're talking about the nuances of past club dynasties, fierce debates over events like 1966, the personal histories of players who crossed the divide. All of this is dissected every single weekend. These environments function as living, breathing historical archives that sharpen memories and aggressively pass that intense narrative right on down to the next generation. Then we have the third mechanism, the anchor of identity. We all share this universal human need to belong to a larger narrative, right? To find a sense of home and community. For so many in the diaspora, this dedicated physical space is the one place in their daily lives where their specific cultural heritage is perfectly mirrored back to them. Sustaining this rivalry provides a vital grounding force. It offers an incredibly powerful psychological anchor in a foreign land, basically connecting them to a specific heritage they might otherwise completely lose touch with in their everyday American or Canadian lives. Now, from a social engineering perspective, the physical atmosphere of these venues is starkly different from your standard weekend pub. A typical North American sports bar on a Sunday, well, it's characterized by casual consumption. You know, it's a relaxed atmosphere, people are chatting, maybe eating wings, passively watching a game. But an old firm bar is what sociologists actually call a high-fidelity environment. The pressure in there is identical to Glasgow. Nerves are fraying, the emotional stakes are incredibly high, and the tactical discussions are just intense. There is absolutely nothing casual about this consumption. And to maintain that high-fidelity environment, well, someone has to be in charge. This brings us to the fascinating role of the bar owners. They essentially act as secondary arena managers. They definitely aren't just pouring pints back there. They are actively enforcing the unwritten rules of the rivalry. They carefully curate the community and the physical space to ensure it remains this dedicated vessel for all the tension and tactics. They foster the exact conditions that make the replication of this dynamic possible, all in a place that has absolutely zero inherent geographic connection to the original conflict. Which leads us to the ultimate irony of the entire diaspora effect, something called the paradox of distance. By being completely removed from the physical proximity of the match, the cultural proximity actually becomes way more important to these fans. Supporters located thousands of miles away are often more fiercely dedicated to the pure experience of the rivalry than those actually living over in Glasgow. When you remove the geography from the equation, the cultural performance becomes the only way to prove your connection. And that drives this incredible dedication to the purity of the rivalry. All of this creates what we can call the eternal loop. These bars essentially ensure that the old firm never devolves into just a local issue. They elevate it into a completely globalized, transoceanic phenomenon. This sociological evidence really proves that the rivalry relies entirely on that universal human need to share history and belong to a narrative. It ensures that even in the freezing, bitter depths of New York winter, the cultural echoes of the River Clyde are always heard loud and clear. It's this continuous, eternal loop of memory, distance, and identity. So, looking objectively at the diaspora effect, it really leaves us with a profound question to ask ourselves. Is sustaining this intense culture in North American bars a beautiful, essential act of cultural preservation for expats? Or does it risk artificially keeping alive a historical division that a younger, globalized generation should probably be encouraged to move past? It's a really delicate balance of identity, distance, and legacy. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.